Fletcher Nolan didn't even bother loosening his tie as he stormed through the revolving doors of Nolan Tech's downtown Chicago headquarters. He was already 40 minutes behind, and hadn't even seen the slides for the investor presentation he was about to give. "Where's Liz?" he asked the moment he spotted his assistant near the elevators. "She's out sick. Stomach flu," she said, backing up as he strode toward her. "Then who the hell set up this presentation?" he barked, stabbing the elevator button like it owed him money. A voice behind him answered, calm, clear, and definitely not intimidated. "That would be me." Fletcher turned. Standing there in black slacks, a dark blouse, and a lanyard that said temp was a woman he didn't recognize. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, a few strands curling over her cheek. She didn't flinch when his eyes landed on her. "I'm Remi Daniels," she said, holding out a flash drive. "I was brought in yesterday to help the marketing team. When Liz called in, I offered to finish prepping the deck." "You built this?" he asked, taking the drive. "From scratch," his eyes narrowed. "You had less than 24 hours, she offered, a small shrug. "I don't sleep well anyway." Before he could reply, the elevator doors opened. "You're coming," he said, jerking his head toward the elevator. I'm not walking into a room full of billion-dollar investors blind. If anything's wrong with this presentation, you're answering for it." She hesitated, then stepped in. The elevator ride was quiet, tense. Remi stood beside him, arms crossed, staring at the numbers ticking up with no sign of nerves. Fletcher snuck a glance at her. She didn't look corporate. She looked real, raw, like someone who hadn't been handed anything but made it look effortless anyway. The doors opened to the top floor. "Sit in the back. Don't speak unless I look at you," he said, walking out. "Charming," she muttered under her breath. He heard it, but he didn't stop. The conference room was packed. Wall-to-wall suits, murmuring investors, and the kind of tension that made grown men sweat through Armani. Fletcher walked to the front, plugged in the flash drive, and took a deep breath. Then the first slide hit the screen. He blinked. It was clean, bold, visually stunning, and the tagline across the top, "What's next isn't just innovation, it's impact." He looked back at Remi. She didn't smile. She just nodded once. The next 20 minutes were a blur of numbers, strategy, and vision. Fletcher didn't just speak, he performed. Every time he clicked to the next slide, it felt like the deck was reading his mind. He'd never had one this intuitive. Every investor in the room was locked in. When it ended, they clapped, not politely, enthusiastically. People stood to shake his hand. And when the room started to clear, he turned and locked eyes with Remi. "You, office, now." She followed him down the hallway, no hesitation in her steps. Inside his glass-walled corner office, he closed the door and turned to face her. "That presentation was good," she offered, arching a brow. "Incredible," he admitted, one hand braced on the edge of his desk. "You knew exactly how to structure it." The narrative, the visuals, hell, even the font choices were perfect. "I used to do pitch decks for a VC firm," she said. "Their CEOs were less appreciative than you." He studied her for a moment. "Where are you from, originally?" "Milwaukee. But I moved here a few years ago." "Why temp work?" Her jaw tightened. "Personal reasons." He didn't press, but something about the way she said it made him curious. "You're not just good, Remi, you're dangerous," he said. To his surprise, she smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment. Stay on." "Full-time," she blinked. "Excuse me, I'm not asking. You're hired marketing strategist. I'll triple what the agency's paying you." Fletcher, is there a reason you can't accept?" She looked down for a second. "It's not about the money, I've never had someone offer something like that after knowing me for less than an hour." He stepped closer. "I don't make offers I don't mean." She looked up at him. Her eyes were this sharp, stormy gray that made it hard to look away. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll stay." He nodded once. "Good." She turned to leave. "Remi," he called just before she reached the door. "You saved my ass today." She looked over her shoulder. "You're welcome, CEO." She left with that, and for the first time in months, Fletcher sat down at his desk, smiling. He didn't know much about Remi Daniels yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He wanted to. 4 days later, Remi was seated at a long glass table in a 10th-floor conference room, surrounded by brand directors and senior managers arguing over brand refresh timelines. She tilted her chair back slightly, pen tapping rhythmically against the edge of her notepad, her eyes scanning the dull agenda projected on the wall. Her ideas were being ignored again, buried beneath louder voices and conservative strategies. A chair scraped back. Someone muttered something about circling back next week. The meeting adjourned with no decisions made. She gathered her things and headed back to her desk, a corner cubicle tucked away from the main floor bustle. Her inbox had piled up, requests for data pulls, feedback on a half-baked campaign from the PR team, and a calendar invite from Fletcher Nolan, subject line, "Office. Now." She stared at it for a beat too long, then stood and straightened her blouse. He wasn't seated when she entered. He stood near the floor-length windows, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a steaming espresso. The skyline behind him made the whole scene look like it belonged in a movie. "You needed something?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "I want you on the rebrand," he said without turning. "That's not my department." "It is now." She stepped further in. "You've got 3 VPs fighting over that project and a dozen people already assigned to it. Why pull me in?" He turned to face her. "Because you're the only one in this building who says anything worth listening to." Her brow lifted, but she didn't argue. "I've seen your notes from the last few meetings," he continued. "You have a better grasp on consumer behavior than half the people with corner offices. I can't exactly overhaul a campaign when I'm not even looped in on the planning calls." "You will be," he said. "From now on, you report directly to me." She folded her arms. "That's going to rattle some egos." "I'm not here to babysit egos," she studied him. "You're serious." "I don't have time to play politics, Remi. I need results, and I trust you to get them." She felt the weight of that statement in her chest. Trust wasn't something she was used to. "Not from people with power. I'll need access to the original brand research and whatever prototypes the design team's already got," she said. "You'll have both by the end of the hour. And I want to bring in someone from outside, a former colleague. She's not corporate, but she's brilliant with identity development." He nodded without hesitation. "Done." She hesitated, then asked, "Why are you giving me this much freedom?" "Because I want this launch to mean something." "And I think you do too." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, let's rebuild it." As she turned to leave, he added, "One more thing." She paused. "I'm hosting a private event Saturday night. It's a networking thing, investors, partners, a few board members. Bring your ideas. I want you to meet the people who are going to back this. You want me to pitch at a black tie event. You'll be brilliant." She gave a dry laugh. "You haven't even seen me in a dress." His eyes flicked over her once, deliberate and intense. "I don't need to." Her breath caught. Just for a second. Then she slipped out of his office without saying another word. By Saturday, the suite at the Langham was transformed. White orchids spilled from vases taller than most guests, and the view of the river glittered beneath the glass walls. Soft jazz played from a grand piano in the corner, and servers moved through the crowd with champagne flutes balanced effortlessly on trays. Remi stood near the bar, the deep navy gown hugging her in a way that made her question every fashion decision she'd ever made before that night. Her friend had insisted on doing her hair, soft curls pinned loosely at the back of her neck. She hadn't planned on staying long. Just show up, be polite, and get back to her apartment before midnight. But the moment Fletcher spotted her from across the room, his posture shifted. He crossed the floor in long, purposeful strides, stopping a breath away. "You clean up well," he said, voice low. "You say that like you expected me not to." "I wasn't sure you'd show." "I wasn't sure either." Their eyes held. Something charged passed between them, unspoken but impossible to ignore. "Come with me," he said. She followed him past the main room, through a private hallway and onto a terrace that overlooked the city. It was quieter there, the sound of traffic far below almost soothing. He leaned against the stone railing, looking out. "You know how many people in that room smiled to my face before trying to steal my company?" "I'm guessing most." He glanced at her. "You don't want anything from me, do you?" She shook her head. "Not unless you're hiding a vintage espresso machine in that office of yours." He laughed. "A real one." The tension in his shoulders eased. "I like this view," she said after a moment. "I used to stand here before every big deal, remind myself why I started." What I was fighting for. And what is that? She asked. He looked at her, really looked. Legacy, she nodded. That's a heavy thing to chase. I've carried heavier. They were quiet for a while, then he said, come with me to Milan next week. She blinked. What? There's a tech and design summit. I want you on stage with me. You'll help present the rebrand. That's not a small ask, I know. What if I say no? Then I'll ask again in a way that makes it impossible to refuse. Her lips curved, but she didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, I'll think about it. He nodded. Fair enough. As they stepped back inside, someone called his name. He turned to go, but not before brushing his fingers lightly across hers. A spark shot straight through her. And for the first time in a long time, Remi Daniels wasn't sure she wanted to keep her distance. Remi stood in front of the full-length mirror in her hotel suite, adjusting the collar of the tailored black blazer she'd picked up in a rush that morning. She wasn't used to this kind of travel private jet, chauffeured car, a suite stocked with fresh fruit and imported bottled water, but she wasn't about to let it throw her off. She'd agreed to fly to Milan with Fletcher because of the rebrand. That was it. She told herself that more than once while reviewing the talking points she'd drafted on the flight over. But that didn't explain why she hadn't slept a full hour the night before. Or why she'd spent 20 minutes debating between two shades of lipstick before settling on the one that made her feel the most like armor. The door buzzed. She opened it to find Fletcher standing there in a slate gray suit, no tie, collar open just enough to make her pulse skip. You ready? He asked, just finished reviewing the slides. You won't need them, her brow lifted. Excuse me, you know the material better than anyone, no notes, no script. Just tell the story. That's a risky move. That's why I brought you. She followed him down the hotel corridor, both of them silent as they stepped into the elevator. The tension wasn't awkward, it was charged, palpable, like a wire stretched too tight. The car waiting downstairs had tinted windows and leather seats that smelled new. Neither of them spoke until the driver pulled onto a narrow street lined with old stone buildings and ivy-covered balconies. Fletcher glanced at her. You ever been to Europe before? Once. A backpacking trip in college. I ran out of money in Prague and ended up sleeping in a hostel with no doors. He chuckled. That sounds like hell. It was. But the beer was cheap. They arrived at the venue, a converted palazzo with vaulted ceilings and arched windows that poured sunlight into the courtyard. Inside, the summit buzzed with energy. Booths showcased cutting-edge tech, and clusters of people in sleek suits and designer sneakers debated market trends over espresso. Fletcher led her through the crowd toward a small stage set up in the center of the main room. You'll go on after me, just 15 minutes. Tell them what this brand will mean 5 years from now, not what it will become. You're not nervous about letting me take the reins. I'd be stupid not to. He stepped up to the stage without another word. She watched from the edge as he spoke, no slides, no teleprompter. Just confidence, vision, and a voice that held the room like gravity. He didn't pitch a company. He pitched a future, and he made every person there want to be part of it. When he stepped down, he didn't look at her. He didn't need to. She already knew it was time. She walked onto the stage, heels clicking against the marble. The murmurs died down as she reached the center. I'm not a CEO, she began. I'm not even a director. I came into this company as a temp with a laptop that overheated after 10 minutes. But I saw something in Nolan tech that I hadn't seen in a long time, not just innovation intention. She told them about the vision behind the rebrand, not with jargon or buzzwords, but with clarity and purpose. She painted pictures with her words. The child who'd grow up in a city powered by cleaner energy, the entrepreneur who'd build a startup using Nolan's tools, the designer who'd launch her first product through an ecosystem they helped create. By the time she stepped down, no one clapped right away. It was that kind of silence, the kind that came when people were still absorbing something they hadn't expected. Then the applause came. Louder than before. Sustained, she found Fletcher by the bar in the back corner, drink in hand, watching her. You didn't tell me you were going to do that, he said as she joined him. You didn't give me a script. He handed her a glass of something golden and smooth. You just got us 3 new partners. One of them owns the largest QA firm in Western Europe. She took a sip. Should I ask for a raise? He leaned in slightly. That depends. Are you planning to stay? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out across the room, watching executives and founders crowd around the Nolan tech booth, talking excitedly to the team Fletcher had flown in. I've stayed in a lot of places that didn't deserve me, she said finally. This one might. They left the venue after midnight, the city quiet and washed in amber streetlights. Fletcher didn't offer to take her back to the hotel. Instead, he walked beside her in silence, through a narrow side street that opened into a small, empty piazza with a fountain in the center. Why did you really hire me? She asked, sitting on the edge of the fountain. You had a dozen other people who could have done the job. He stood across from her, hands in his pockets. Because you didn't flinch. At what? At me, she tilted her head. You think people are afraid of you? I know they are. I built a reputation on being the kind of man no one crosses. I don't think that's the same as respect. It's not. But it worked for a long time. And now I want something more. She looked at him, the man who'd built an empire with nothing but drive, who stood in front of the world like he owed it nothing, yet looked at her like she was the first person who ever saw him clearly. I don't fall easily, she said quietly. I don't ask for things I can't handle. You sure about that? He stepped closer. Try me. She didn't move away, didn't blink. Just let the city breathe around them, the fountain trickling behind her, the air warm and still. Then, without warning, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. I'm not offering you a job anymore, he said. I'm offering you a seat beside me. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Fletcher stepped out of the conference call and shut the door gently behind him, his shoulders tight with a pressure he hadn't felt in years. The Milan summit had tripled investor interest, but it also lit a fire under every project timeline. He'd barely slept since they got back. The office was a storm of deadlines, prototypes, and meetings, and yet none of it was what kept him up at night. What kept him up was the woman sitting 2 floors below, completely unaware she'd become the only thing that ever made him second-guess his grip on control. He crossed the executive wing and headed toward the elevator. His reflection in the mirrored doors showed a man who looked like he had everything. But he'd never been further from satisfied. When the doors opened, he didn't go to his usual floor. He bypassed it, hitting the button for the creative division Remi's floor. She was alone in a meeting room, standing beside a whiteboard filled with sketches and notes. A half-eaten salad sat untouched at the edge of the table. Her phone buzzed, but she didn't look at it. She was too focused, lips moving slightly as she reread a note. He knocked once on the glass and stepped inside. She glanced up. Did the board review go sideways? No, it went fine, but you're here. I didn't come to talk about the board. She leaned her hip against the table. Then what? I need to know where we stand, she blinked. Fletcher, I know you didn't come here looking for this. I didn't either, but it's here, and I'm not good at pretending otherwise. She didn't speak for a few seconds. Her fingers traced a line on the edge of the table absently, thoughts clearly running faster than she could voice them. I've been trying to keep things simple, she said finally. Do the job, stay clear of distractions. Is that what I am? Until Milan, I could lie to myself about that. He stepped closer. You're not a distraction, Remi. You're the only thing that's made sense in months, hell, maybe years. Her jaw tensed. You think that now. But feelings don't survive pressure like this, not when everything's tied to the same company, the same outcome. I've built this company to outlast me, but I've never built anything for myself, not personally, not until I met you. You say that like I'm a guarantee. You're not, you're a risk. When I'm finally willing to take, she looked at him, and for once there was no careful calculation in her eyes, just exposure, real, raw uncertainty. I don't know if I can trust this, she said quietly. Then let me show you. She opened her mouth to respond, but a knock came at the door. One of the production leads poked his head in, oblivious to the tension. They're asking for you upstairs, he said to Remi. Something about the final design files for the launch. She nodded once. I'll be right there. The man disappeared and she exhaled slowly. I need to finish this, she said. I'm not going anywhere. She left without another word. That night, Fletcher didn't go home. He stayed in the office until the last light on the floor below went out. He watched from his window as Remi stepped into the elevator, her shoulders pulled back with the weight of someone who carried more than just deadlines. The next morning, he called his driver and told him to cancel every meeting. Then he stepped out of the building and into the back of a waiting car, a plan already forming. 2 days later, Remi walked into her office to find a handwritten note on her desk. Not an email, not a calendar invite, just a folded sheet tucked under her coffee mug, "Meet me at the rooftop by 7. Wear whatever makes you feel most like yourself." She stared at the note for a long time. Then she tucked it into her bag and went back to work without telling a soul. At 10 minutes before 7, she stepped onto the upper terrace of the Nolan Tech building. The rooftop was transformed. Strings of warm lights hung from steel beams, casting a soft glow over a linen-covered table set for two. A small jazz quartet played in the corner, their presence subtle but unmistakably intentional. Fletcher stood by the railing, the city stretching behind him in endless flickers of gold and steel. "You did all this?" she asked, stepping forward. "I told you I wanted to show you." She looked around. "This looks like a proposal," he smiled, but it was quieter than usual. "Not yet." He pulled out her chair and she sat, still absorbing the surreal shift from boardrooms to candlelight. Dinner passed in a blur of conversation that had nothing to do with work. They talked about the books they never had time to finish, the places they wanted to see, the versions of themselves they'd hidden from the world. When dessert came, he didn't touch it. "I've never done this before," he said, watching her across the table. "Not like this." "You mean dinner on a rooftop with a live band?" "I mean letting someone see every part of me before I even know if I deserve them." She folded her hands in her lap. "I don't need perfect, Fletcher. I just need real." He stood and walked to her side of the table, holding out his hand. "Then come with me." She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. He led her to the edge of the terrace where the string lights faded and the city took over. The music swelled behind them and he turned her gently toward him. "I'm not asking you to figure everything out tonight," he said, "but I want you to know something." She looked up at him, her breath catching. "I love you," he said, "not because you fixed my company or made my life easier. I love you because you walked into my world and refused to be changed by it, because you stood across from me and made me want more than I ever thought I'd have." She didn't speak. Instead, she stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't uncertain. It was inevitable. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I love you too." The city faded. The work, the pressure, the risk, it all disappeared. This wasn't a pitch. It was the beginning of something permanent. And for the first time in his life, Fletcher Nolan didn't feel like he had something to prove. He just felt home. 3 weeks later, Remi stood at the edge of the stage in the Nolan Tech auditorium, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The rebrand launch was in full swing. Journalists, shareholders, and influencers filled every seat, their attention fixed on the sleek new visuals projected across the massive screen behind her. But Remi wasn't focused on the crowd or the presentation she'd helped craft. Her eyes were fixed on Fletcher, standing offstage in a navy suit that looked like it had been sewn directly into his skin. He wasn't watching the audience. He was watching her. As the applause swelled and the lights dimmed for the final video reveal, she descended the steps and crossed the floor toward him. "You ready for the chaos?" she asked, her voice low. "I've never felt calmer," he said. "Liar." "You're right," he said. "I'm terrified." "But not of the launch," she tilted her head. "Then what?" "Of what happens when we get everything we wanted." The video ended. The room erupted in a standing ovation. Remi felt the vibration of it in her chest, but she didn't look away from him. "We build something new," she said. "Together." Afterward, the rooftop was packed with people again, press, partners, and employees celebrating the company's rebirth. Waiters passed trays of champagne, and glass lanterns swayed in the soft wind, but Remi wasn't mingling. She stood near the edge of the balcony, trying to find a moment of stillness in the whirlwind of success. A soft rustle behind her made her turn. Fletcher approached, holding 2 glasses. "They're calling the launch a landmark," I heard. A masterclass in redefinition. They're not wrong. She took the glass he offered and leaned against the railing beside him. So what now, you tell me? I've been thinking, she said. There's a nonprofit in Detroit that works with girls in underserved schools. They teach coding and entrepreneurship. I've been wanting to get involved, maybe even help them build their own incubator program. He studied her quietly, then asked, You want to leave? No, she said, but I want to expand. We've built something incredible here, but it doesn't have to stay boxed inside these walls. I want to make sure this brand actually lives up to its promises. He didn't hesitate. Do it. I'll back the entire program. She turned to him, eyes searching. You'd commit to that without a single pitch. You're the only pitch I've ever needed. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You're getting dangerously good at this whole love thing. He stepped closer, one hand sliding into hers. That's because I've had the best kind of teacher. The music faded, replaced by a quiet hum of conversation. The city stretched beyond them, lights flickering like fireflies. Fletcher reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, square box her breath caught. I wasn't going to do this tonight, he said. I thought maybe after the dust settled when things were quieter, but I don't want to wait. She stared at the box. Fletcher, I've spent years building something that would outlive me, but none of it means anything if I can't build a life with you. Not just a brand, not just a company, a life. He opened the box. The ring was simple, elegant, and unmistakably an emerald-cut diamond set in a platinum band, no frills, just clarity. I'm not asking for a perfect future, he said. I'm asking for a real one, with you. Will you marry me? She didn't wait, didn't hesitate. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her in, their lips meeting in a kiss that silenced everything else. When they pulled apart, she whispered, We're really doing this. He smiled, his voice rough. We already are. 6 months later, Remi stepped barefoot across the sun-drenched terrace of their villa in Lake Como. The water stretched out before her, calm and silver, while the morning breeze caught the hem of her linen robe. Birds sang from the olive trees, and somewhere inside, she could hear Fletcher on a business call, his voice low and steady. But even now, with everything they'd built, she still felt like that girl who once walked into an office with a flash drive and too much audacity. She turned as Fletcher stepped outside, already changed out of his suit, barefoot and holding 2 cups of espresso. You'll never be able to sit still here, she teased, taking one. I'm adjusting, he said, pulling her close. I even scheduled a nap, she laughed, leaning into him. You're evolving. I have the right motivation. They sipped their coffee in silence, wrapped in the kind of peace that neither of them had known before. No deadlines loomed, no presentations, just the soft rustle of trees and the quiet certainty of each other. Later that day, they'd walk to the local market, buy fresh figs and cured meats, and cook dinner together. Nothing extravagant, just them, no suits, no boardrooms, just a love that had rewritten the rules. And as the sun set behind the hills, casting golden light across the lake, Fletcher would take her hand and remind her of the promise they'd made not just to love each other, but to build something lasting, this time not for the world, but for themselves.